Hello there again. Good to be with you here on Connect Africa, here on the JoyNews channel, coming to you live from Ghana's capital, Accra. And we are asking the question tonight: where is Bobi Wine, the Ugandan opposition leader who went into hiding after losing the elections to 81-year-old long-term President Museveni, says he will appear at the right time. But when will that be? We'll get you details, plus some analysis shortly. Security is on high alert as the Nigerian army is now revealing plots to overthrow President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. In the next few days, about 16 officers from the Nigerian army will now face some trial in connection with the supposed acts of indiscipline which the Nigerian army has referred to.
We will not allow coup after coup. West Africa's president.
We'll get into the details for you shortly, but here, first of all, is a wrap of some of the major stories making the headlines across the continent.
Its new president, Mamadi Doumbouya, has appointed a prime minister less than 2 weeks after being sworn into office. Amadou Oriba, who served as prime minister for nearly 2 years under the military junta, returns to the same role under the new government. His reappointment was announced in a decree read on national television on Monday evening. Oriba and his cabinet had resigned last week following Doumbouya's inauguration. President Doumbouya was elected to a 7-year term in December, 4 years after he overthrew Guinea's first democratically elected President Alpha Condé. Although he initially pledged not to run for office after seizing power, voters in September approved a new constitution in a referendum that allowed members of the junta to contest elections. In the same decree, Doumbouya announced that the new government will comprise 27 ministries and 2 secretaries general, with further appointments expected in the coming days.
Village of Binzaro, where more bodies were found last year. The discovery appeared to show that the same cult had continued to operate even after the first massacre site was discovered and Mackenzie arrested. He's been accused in previous Shakahola trials of inciting his followers to starve themselves to meet Jesus, using enforcers to prevent people from leaving the forest. Efforts to regulate religion in Kenya have been opposed in the past as undermining the division between church and state.
M23 rebels seized the eastern Congolese city of Goma following a sharp escalation in fighting early last year, and the city remains under their control. Since the takeover, economic activity has slowed dramatically. At Goma's central market, once the backbone of the local economy, traders say customers have become increasingly scarce as a deepening economic crisis grips the city. The Rwanda-backed M23 is the most powerful of more than 100 armed groups operating in the mineral-rich Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, close to the border with Rwanda. The conflict has fueled one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, more than 7 million people have been displaced across the country.
Well, some of the major stories making the headlines across Africa for you, but the focus now is on Nigeria, as well as military officers there are set to appear before a court-martial after being accused of plotting to overthrow the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. In a statement, the military said 16 officers were arrested in October last year over what it initially described as acts of indiscipline and breaches of service regulations. At the time, the army dismissed rumors and reports of an attempted coup d'etat. However, following further investigations, authorities have now acknowledged that some of the officers will now face the military judicial panel in connection with the alleged coup plot. Nigeria has had that long and sensitive history of military involvement in governance, recording a series of coups between 1996 and also 1993, making the allegations of coup plotting particularly significant there. Well, speaking of the president himself, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, a couple of years back, he joined other West African leaders under the ECOWAS bloc to declare a zero tolerance for coup d'etat in the Sahel region.
We will not allow coup after coup. West Africa's president. We will take this up seriously. with African Union. And it's to the European Union and Britain and America. Take it up. It's a challenge. Yes, democracy is very tough to manage, but it's the best form of government. And we also ascribe to it. We must bite back.
Well, so Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu there some years back, and it's now becoming a reality that, of course, there's a need for a concerted effort in tackling that, isn't it? Let's bring in Austin Aigbe, who's Advocacy Officer at Democracy Solidarity Group, WADEMOS. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, and thanks for joining us from Nigeria, where you are, of course, watching all of this unfold. You've always made the case that, well, West African leaders ought to be cautious, especially in the coastal parts of the SAP region.
Exactly. Thank you very much for having me, Blessed. The truth is that West African leaders need to be careful. What you're seeing in the Nigerian case looked like a joke, even though evidence at that time already suggested what we know now. The military denied it promptly and said there was nothing like that. And today, the military are now trying the people that you said were nothing like that just about 3 months ago. So sometimes, in an attempt to hide official secrets, they needed to also apologize to Nigerians for lying against, lying against the 16 officers. Maybe they didn't really do anything that was wrong, because when officers were picked up across the country, they were all connected in a way, and there was information that was already coming out. Sarah reporter has blew the news initially, and the denier is there was no need to deny it. There was just no need to deny it.
Speaking of the implications for West Africa's largest democracy, Nigeria, if it goes down, that could spell doom, further doom for the entire region, isn't it?
If you, as a student of military and politics, of course, political science as it were, military invasion in country or military in African politics has a way of snowballing from country to country. At that time, particularly in the 90s, if there's a military coup in somewhere like in Ghana, expect a military coup in Nigeria within a year. And when military invasion in Ghana stopped, as gradually just moved up to 1999 before we now have a democratic regime. And since then, there hadn't been any military rule. It's only in Benin that had a very long history of democratic rule. They've now had military regime for too long a time. But with military gradually moving into Africa, West African region, with what we now know about Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Niger, and of course, the self-announced coup in Guinea-Bissau, of course, Conakry, Guinea had just moved out of military regime, didn't quite disturb me because of the architecture of military in French-controlled territories. Unlike in English-controlled, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and all of those English-controlled, including Nigeria, of course, there be some measure of civil military regime that the military doctrine has been addressed in a way that military authority has been subsumed under civil authority. But I didn't fear that we were going to have military regime. But recently, I had a conversation on military coup in Nigeria, and I said, coup cannot happen successful coup, not that coup may not happen, successful coup cannot happen in Nigeria. And people argue that I was speaking nonsense because of the architecture in the way that the military divisions have been fragmented. We now have one division, two divisions, and all of the divisions across the country, wherein if you embark on a coup today and you strike in Abuja, there's a likelihood that the other divisions will come after you. How are you able to manage those generals and those amuris in all across the country? Ghana also have that kind of model. Sierra Leone does, and that is why the the attempted coup of November 2023 did not quite succeed because there was a quick counter from another Amory location. So I think that where the fear would be if coup happened in Nigeria, Ghana would have been subject to a possible coup. But the good news is that according to the military, he arrested the sitting officers. Hopefully, it will never happen.
Yeah, but whatever the case, we don't even want a semblance of a coup d'etat in the region. That's not what we're praying for. But unfortunately, that's where the region finds itself, with the highest number of coup d'etats all over the place. But speaking of what's happening to, President Tinubu's administration, this attempted coup, there's the underlying concern of the economic performance of the country, a reason for which some of these issues may be coming up in the country. Would you say that this is linked in any way to the economic situation of Nigeria as we speak?
There are several drivers, I think. One is the supposed assumption that the Nigerian state is gradually heading towards a one-party state, and that it's becoming more like a militarized civil rule that you have in this country. To further back that is the economic situation, and that the government continue to allege that everything is working very well, that they've improved in economy, they've improved in all the sectors. But we know, ordinary people, like people will always say, don't talk about economic issue. Go and ask a typical Nigerian, is your life better off? So talking about human capacity development, human capacity enhancement, living condition, purchasing power parity. In the last administration of Muhammadu Buhari, now late, people thought that we have had the worst administration in terms of economic crisis. But today, on the day of, May the 29th, 2023, when President Muhammadu Buhari, Bola Tinubu took over as the mantle as president of Nigeria, he removed what would have been like the organized point of Nigeria, the subsidy in petroleum product. That snowballed Nigeria into some financial crisis or economic woe. But the government refused to accept it. But again, is military the alternative? No, because military will only come in, and like I always say, 6 months down the line, we have seen what's happening in Guinea-Bissau now. They said, oh, we're just going to clear up, but now they move it to December. Before you know what's happening, from December around November of this year, they will tell you the things are not working well, they move to another 6 months, and they never leave power.
I see. Coup should certainly not be the option. But grateful for your time here on the show. Austin Igbe, Advocacy Officer with Democracy Solidarity Group, Wademos. But speaking of democracy, there's lots of drama happening elsewhere across the continent as well, because Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine says he will reveal his whereabouts at the right time. Amid growing concerns about his safety following the country's January 15 general elections, Bobi Wine, the staunch critic of President Yoweri Museveni, went into hiding after the elections, which saw 81-year-old leader re-elected with a reported 71.65% of the votes, as we're learning of. After weeks of that campaign, which saw many crackdown on Bobi Wine rallies, Bobi Wine says he's now afraid for his life. And his sudden disappearance has raised concerns among supporters, especially after Ugandan soldiers reportedly raided his home, with his wife now being hospitalized. Bobi Wine took to X some few hours ago, pointing out what will happen in the coming days. He talked about the fact that some of the operatives, the military, of course, went to some places asking about his whereabouts, and also in a bit to compromise and to get some tip-offs around where he was living. But then he's pointing out at the very last point of his claim here that, quote, "I will reappear at an appropriate time." That's, the very parting words of Bobi Wine as he, goes with the same hashtag, Free Uganda Now, as part of his movement towards calling for change, political change in Uganda. But what's the implication for Uganda's democracy? Joining us now is Tendai Mbaje, regional governance and elections expert. Olufemi Ogunjobi is also an African affairs analyst. So both gentlemen joining us on this matter. Tendai, I want to start off with you because this is coming at a time where, of course, the United Nations is also raising concerns about, this seeming crackdown on dissenting voices or opposition voices amongst many nascent democracies across the continent. Tell us more about what we're seeing now happen to Bobi Wine and what the implications could be for Uganda's democracy.
Thank you so much. And what we have seen is that Bobi Wine, was the main rival in the recently held elections, and who in the past few years, whose political career has been growing, and a huge population, particularly young people, they resonate with his politics, they resonate with his reformist agenda, they resonate with what he stands for. If you look at the statistics of Uganda, half of Uganda's population is about 17 years of age. About 2/3 of the population is under the age of 30 from the statistics that we have been reading. So what it does that is that we will see a more fragmented Uganda if this politics is not addressed. We will see that there will be animosity between the young people and the older generation. We'll see a more destabilized Uganda going forward, because the electoral grievances, they don't die a natural death. Electoral grievances, they manifest in all kinds of things. One fear that I personally have as an analyst is that electoral grievances, sometimes they might result in a playground, or they become an incubator for rebellion. If the young people feel that there is no means for justice, there is no means to liberate themselves, they might end up being infiltrated by the third party and might find themselves holding guns. So that's electoral grievances cannot be solved by just repression, but there is need for consensus and national dialogue.
Yeah, and many would have thought that the elections is over. Why the fixation on Bobi Wine, by the way?
The fixation on Bobi Wine is simply because Bobi Wine has the majority of young people following his politics, his agenda, reformist agenda. Young people have expressed need for change. At least there's also a high rising of unemployment, economic challenges in Uganda. And also, Museveni is the only president that Uganda has, young people in Uganda have seen since 1986. So there is that yearning for change. That is why, and he is a possible vehicle for that change. But however, with the secularization of politics and many other challenges, Bobi Wine cannot find himself at the helms of power. So the fixation on him is simply because he is the voice of young people, and he's the only alternative voice that is giving the incumbent much sleepless nights. Yeah. So that's the fixation. Yes.
I see. Let me bring in Olufemi as well, who's monitoring the developments from where you are, Olufemi. The point about the international community and what kind of help they could be bringing to bear now, because many international organizations also did observe the elections.
Absolutely, Bezos. Thank you so much for having me. So first of all, any international intervention should focus on protecting democratic space and human rights in Uganda. And this is not just backing any particular politician or installing any opposition leader. It basically means that, we're protecting the democratic space, and that there is respect for rule of law, respect for due process, and there is the end to harassment of opposition figures and the likes of Bobi Wine going into hiding. So, and also that the international community should also, apply targeted sanctions, against individuals who are responsible for the violence during elections, and not just the ordinary Ugandans as well. And also that the international community should also, look through elections, how elections are conducted, for instance. For instance, the AU response towards these elections was a bit mixed. There was the AU that says that congratulated Museveni on the outcome of the election, and then there was also the election review that said the election happened under duress and that was marred with violence and death. So there is also the need for international bodies to look into election and just avoid, rubber stamping disputed elections, push for dialogues and all of that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that point. But speaking about the 81-year-old's grip on power, Museveni himself, what does that mean for democracy in Uganda?
I think it raises concerns. Because it boils down to what Tenda said earlier, that Museveni has been in power for longer than I've been alive, and the implications for democracy in Uganda means that elections stop being a genuine avenue for change. People don't look forward to elections anymore, and then when elections are held, the competition and accountability are absent from elections, and it just becomes procedural rather than being substantive avenue for change. And then the risk is that every election cycle will be marred by instability, and as a matter of fact, it radicalizes the opposition, and that is exactly what we're experiencing right now with with the opposition that Bobby Wine presents Museveni. Yeah, it's sad because it radicalizes the opposition. They feel that their needs are not met. You've been president for more than I've been alive. So, and there is nothing that signals change. So it suppresses peaceful political participation, and then it irritates people, and then radicalizes the group of that want to push for change.
I see. Gentlemen, we have to go, but let me take your final thoughts on this. In fact, the fact that Bobby Wine will be away from public view now. Tendai, I don't know if you also want to comment on this whole concern about the rubber stamp while we pay attention to the fact that Bobby Wine will be out of public view for some time.
Yes, the rubber stamping is very disappointing. The African Union Election Observation Mission was very diplomatic in the statement that the union released. And this election happened in the dark. There was no accountability. There was no information that was available to the public of what was going on. It cannot be a credible election. It cannot be considered a fair election when citizens don't know about the process itself, how it's unfolding. So this issue of rubber stamping, it should have been called that the African Union is not in a position to comment, because what did they observe when the internet shut down, the communication is cut off. So now citizens are losing trust in the institution itself. These are the feedback that we as analysts we get from the citizens of Africa, saying that we're losing trust in the credibility of the African Union itself, and also seeing the chairperson of the African Union quickly congratulating Uganda. He quickly congratulated Uganda and later on congratulated Central African Republic, other countries that had held elections before Uganda. So this is really a disappointing factor, we must say.
Yeah. 30 seconds for you, Olufemi, as we wrap up on this matter.
Yeah, I think moving forward, I think the support should be about defending democratic space and human rights in Uganda, and so it doesn't just become the new normal. And so people don't just look forward to elections that it's going to be marred with violence, it's going to be marred with repression. There should be accountability, as Tenda said. There should be deep electoral review, and there should be due process for how things are done, and so that the civic space would also be free to go about their duties, and there'll be serious respect for rule of law as well.
Yeah. We'll keep paying attention to that space. Grateful to you, Olufemi, and also to Tendai Mbaji for joining us, you both. Anyway, we take you now to the U.S. The president there, Donald Trump, is now stepping up his attacks on the Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. In a post on his Truth Social platform Monday, Trump is now indicating that the Department of Justice and Congress would now be investigating Omar's personal wealth. Let's bring in Nana Kakarina, who's in the U.S. for us, always monitoring some of these developments. That's the lady we're talking about in our shots there. But who is she really, and how important or otherwise is she to U.S. politics?
You know what, Blessed, great to see you. Now, these attacks go beyond, domestic politics. If President Trump is not mispronouncing her name, he's basically misspelling Congresswoman Omar's name, like what he did yesterday, where he misspelled her name. Or he's actually going beyond personal attacks and actually launching attacks on the country, Somalia itself. President Trump has called Somalia a disaster. He had called Somalia the worst country on the African continent. But you know what, Blessed, we cannot talk about Congresswoman Omar without talking about the state of Minnesota. This is a state that is home to many, many people from East Africa. So you have majority of residents from Somalia, from Kenya, under this Congresswoman Omar's leadership. So what President Trump is basically saying in his post, if you split it apart, is that, you know what, he does not want Somalis here in the United States. He wants Congresswoman Omar to go back to her country. And like you said, targeting on her wealth. He does not understand why she has millions of dollars.
Speaking about the dollars, speaking about the dollars, though, I'm wondering.
So basically, the dollars, the reaction that we are having with most Africans or Somali Americans right now is that they're questioning whether, you know, what Trump is basically saying, signaling that African immigrants cannot achieve the American dream. They cannot be successful. They cannot own or earn these millions of dollars. And that's very concerning to, you know, Africans as a whole here in the United States. Many of them quickly are also questioning the citizenship, with Trump saying Africans, Miss Omar had her citizenship in 2000, the year 2000. And so with him saying that he has to go home, many Africans are asking, I mean, does this citizenship for African immigrants kind of conditional instead of being absolute? So this is what's going on right now, and goes broad with, you know, it may have an impact on the U.S.-Somalia relations.
Great point. That we need to go in 30 seconds. Any response from the Congresswoman, and are we likely to see any legal showdown in the coming days?
No, the Congresswoman is not backing down. She's never backed down. She has actually responded to President Trump, basically telling President Trump that he's actually using her to kind of as a distraction. Quickly, you know what, the state of Minnesota, there's an immigration crackdown going on right now, the state of Minnesota. President Trump has deployed thousands of ICE agents to target these Somali refugees. And so basically what Omar is saying is a distraction. Trump is just using her as a weapon to kind of distract people from what's really going on in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, interesting times in the U.S. now. Nana Kakari joining us from the U.S. Grateful for your time. And it's a wrap for Connect Africa. I am Blessed Suga. Let's connect on social media. And of course, if you need more stories, head on to myjoyonline.com. More stories there for you. Thanks for your company.